My conversation this week is with Dr Tony Chalkley, a senior lecturer at Deakin's Geelong Warn Ponds campus. Tony's done a lot of research into online dating of late, and he's the perfect person to talk to us about this topic. As before, I highly recommend you take some notes as you watch.
Today I'm going to talk a little about online dating, about representation, identity and the ups and downs of the online world. Well, online dating is actually really difficult because I've read stories of people who have met over something advertised on the trading post, and I would say that the trading post is a classified for selling your old DVD player, but in actual fact some people have met people in that environment. It's a bit like a marketplace, I guess, in that you go to it looking to buy or to sell something. The tricky bit with online dating now is that the web means that you can really have all sorts of different interest groups and all sorts of different focuses, from the very banal and very flat, very plain RSVP, which is just for meeting your lifelong partner. It's a bit like a matchmaker, to quote Fiddler on the Roof. Online dating goes from that, from I'd like to meet somebody to go to the movies with, right up to really specialised, mainly sexual practices, but highly specialised groups, to things like people who are interested in horses, who want to meet other people who are equestrian fans like themselves. They don't want to muck about spending hours getting to know somebody. They like horses, they want somebody who likes horses, and they want to go on a date. It's a filter. I guess one of the functions of online dating is to filter out all of those people that you come across in your life who you think might be a perfect partner, and over time you find that they're not. This is a digital version of sort of analogue meeting, I guess.
My brother told me last week he met in inverted commas his latest or most recent girlfriend on Facebook. They were flirting on Facebook for several weeks, and then he said, "I'm sick of just chatting on Facebook, can I have your phone number?" So technically that's sort of a form of online dating, depending on how you define it.
It is. I mean, if like that, the example of somebody who rang up about something for sale on the trading post and ended up dating the person. It is a form. I mean, everything is online dating if you really want to look at it that much. Theoretically, students on the cloud, I don't know if this has happened, but on our Deakin learning software could in actual fact meet the person that they're doing. Just no different to meeting your girlfriend or boyfriend in a tutorial. What it is just a digital tutorial room. So is Facebook a dating site? Yes. Is it set up to be a dating site? No. But does it become one? I mean, and when you talk to students, they do talk about the idea of hooking up with friends from their friends' books. You know, I've got people that I've never ever met physically, not partners, but people that I don't actually know that are friends of friends of friends, and I only know them on Facebook. Do I know them? I guess I do in the real world. The definition of dating, there's active dating websites. That's those that you go to, you join up, and you pay to be a member of. And then I think there's a whole cohort of sort of passive sites that are more like meeting places as well. So doing it two ways, and that's just setting up a profile which is clearly not real and just trying to observe what people do and say, so not actively participating in it. And a growing number of them allow you just simply to get on as a guest and to look at what people say. My interest is in a few things. Representation. I'm really interested in the way people represent themselves, because it's a form of PR. On these dating sites, the first thing you have to do is compete with 1,000 other men or women that might be in your postcode alone. The second thing is this whole idea of constructing an identity and looking at the sort of identity people construct for themselves as well. Because if you look at it, look at the identity I've set up, which is a bit tongue-in-cheek. You know, I enjoy caving and NASCAR driving. That's not true, but it does make me sound much more interesting. The other thing that I've done, and almost instinctively, is I've taken a few years off my age. Not too many, just enough. 2 or 3 years is sufficient. So I'm really interested in the way people have to advertise themselves, and they have to reconstruct and package themselves through dating services to compete, really, in an open market. Now, that's not so different to going out to a nightclub and wearing the best clothing you've got, being as fit as you can, having your hair cut, putting makeup on, whatever you might do, wearing lifts so you're a little bit taller. It's actually not a new thing. We've been doing it for years, but it's a form of digital plumage, if you like. But I'm interested in that as well. I guess the other thing I'm interested in on these websites is how they differ from each other. A classic example is there is a Christian Mingle website, and when you get onto that, it's very clear. You put in I am, and it says male or female, and a drop-down box comes up. And if you put I am male, all it will load is I'm looking for females. There's quite clearly defined boundaries. And in the same way, if you go to some of the more extreme websites, there's a whole range of drop-downs, some of which you'll be completely amazed about, that people are interested in that or that it even exists. And then it gives you a range, so you actually can be quite specific about what it is you're interested in. And I'm interested in that as well. I'm knocking on from that, I'm interested in people's perceptions about online dating, whether it's acceptable. Because in the last 5 or 6 years, every lecture in ALC201 that I teach, I do a really rough poll where I say to people, who would use online dating to meet someone? And 6 or 7 years ago, it was unacceptable. Maybe 1 or 2 hands went up. Most people went, ooh, that's for creepy old people. What's happened in the last 6 years is that people have either got more honest or online dating has become more acceptable, because people now voluntarily put their hands up to say, yes, I've got a profile on Oasis Blue, or, I made that up, but on RSVP. I've used online dating, or I know someone who has. And no longer do people, particularly 18 or 19-year-olds, go, ooh, like they used to. So I'm interested in that social acceptability, that maybe it's just inevitable. As we've bought books online through Amazon, we've used the trading post to buy things, we've bought things on eBay. We're happy to accept music digitally downloaded to us now. We don't need the CD in our hands. Maybe this just is part of that digital revolution, that it's increasingly acceptable to find a partner online.
I suppose it's going to get easier and easier to research online dating when it becomes more normalised. It would have been perhaps harder to get a survey responded to in the past, but I guess you can sort of look forward to a future of more information, more data, and perhaps easier ethical clearance too.
Well, actually, it's really interesting you say that, because in the last couple of weeks, as I've been sort of reading through, because like I said, I passively consume, but I'm not. There's no stealth or deception involved. But a growing number of people on, particularly Ashley Madison in Australia, have been putting, I do not consent to participate in any university studies. And the University of Sydney must have one running, because I can see that my data is not to be used explicitly or implicitly by the University of Sydney for any of their studies. And I've seen that now on 3 profiles. So it's obviously an area where people are interested in researching, and people are not interested in being research bunnies.
Wow.
So that could change as well. Funny you should mention it, but it has happened. That obviously people are now looking at it, and people don't want to be, as you wouldn't. I mean, it'd be like going into a nightclub saying, "Can I watch you pick up?" It's no different. I mean, it's the same thing. So there are some ethical dilemmas with it as well.
That's fascinating.
People who, the more you do online, the more you do online. You know what I mean? And I'm the same. I increasingly find myself getting cross if I can't do something online. I had to fill out a form and fax it the other day. It nearly killed me. I haven't filled out a form for years. I don't know where the fax machine is. I do a lot of stuff online. I mean, I will confess that I've actually gone to Coles online and bought bread and milk when I have a 7-Eleven 80 metres from my house. The more you do online, the more you do online. So it makes sense that if you post your photos online and you tweet and that you will date. That's where you'll live your life. Whether that is embedded dating, such as playing World of Warcraft with somebody that you end up in a relationship with, or the act of dating online. The concept of trust is an interesting one, because that's the tipping point at which you move from the digital to the analogue, because theoretically, eventually, you want to meet the person in person. If your identity is not true, then what happens is that you'll be one of the people that never meets anybody in the real world. You only meet online. But it's about trust, being able to trust people. and what you got invested in as well. So if you've joined a website as a dare from a friend, and I've interviewed a couple of people who joined up at the end of my lecture only because I dared them to. In actual fact, now they're going out with somebody. So they had little invested, there was not much at risk. They didn't necessarily think that it would come to anything, and because it was such a small investment, they were surprised. But if you have got, and a couple of people I've spoken to talk about the really needy, being able to work out really quickly from somebody that in actual fact I think the expression is high needs, high maintenance. So if you've been involved for a long time and you come across as quite desperate, and there's lots of things lots of signs and symbols that you're desperate, that you don't want to do. So it's about trust, investment, and risk, because it's a risky exercise. If you do it properly, if you really get on and you are seriously looking to meet your life partner, what you're doing is you're placing yourself in a particular area of fairly high risk. If I go out to a nightclub and hope to meet the woman of my dreams, there might be 300 people at the nightclub. The worst I do is embarrass myself in front of 300 people, and maybe 10, or I get rejected, and then that's it, you go home and it's over. But when you do it in the digital world, it's quite public, and the public sphere is quite big, and the risk is quite high as well.
Increased risk, but also potentially sort of a fast tracking of what might take longer in the non-virtual world, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, where you might go from acceptance to rejection in a keystroke. Whereas in the real world, you have signs and symbols, and you might get a non-verbal cue that something's going quite wrong. But in the digital world, you can just simply you can just block someone, and that's it immediately. It happens.
And I've never started a relationship saying what my hobbies were.
Yes, yeah. One of the things that's been in the paper a little bit lately, and if students want to, they simply jump on the Age webpage or the Sydney Morning Herald, any large press, and type in the number of stories of people who have been assaulted as a result of meeting people on dating websites. And I don't know that it's a new problem. I think it's probably a problem that's been around for a while, but it's getting some increased press, so you'll find that it gets written up a little more than before. There's even been a couple of cases in the local area where I live that have actually happened. And there's also the deception, the people who use these websites for financial advantage as well. Everything comes with an up and a downside, but that might be some good research for students to do. Go and find out a dystopian, a negative story about online dating, and it won't be hard.
I think when you get to the point of having a moral panic on stage night or a current affair, you're finished. Like that, it's normalised by the time it's on stage night also. You're right.
If a major popular current affairs program has got footage and got it together, then you're right, the horse is bolted. Yeah. But it's certainly very big business. There are many millions of people who are currently on online dating sites, and even if a small percentage of those are genuine or legitimate, it's still an awful lot of people.
Movie of the week is Disconnect. Many thanks to Carolyn for the nomination. This film is a film in the tradition of all those other films that have separate but intersecting storylines that somehow neatly come together at the perfect moment in order for the movie to end. Like Crash, like Traffic, like Crossing Over and The Air I Breathe. Oh my god, there are so many of them. I call these highly original films that are very similar to each other. There's no easy redemption in Disconnect. But hold on, before you walk away, it does have your favourite character from True Blood in it. No, not the creepy one. Bill! No, not the whiny one. Socky! Yes, it's the hot one. Eric! This hard-hitting film is about dangerous sexting, online gambling, identity theft, cyberbullying, vigilante justice, trauma, grief, and underage internet porn stars. Online sexualities are not necessarily happy sexualities, but then not much in this movie is happy anyway. If you want something a little bit lighter, you could try Spike Jonze's movie Her, in which the protagonist develops a romantic relationship with an enhanced version of Siri. You do have to watch Joaquin Phoenix masturbate to his phone. Personally, Google Maps doesn't do it for me.
Well, that varies, and this isn't a comprehensive sample, this is just a few, but it depends on what you want to do with those websites. So for example, if you are on one of the more basic ones where you are single and you want to meet other single people, then the costs are quite low and the interactivity is quite high. Conversely, websites like Ashley Madison, for example, which are, its motto is have an affair, life's too short. Other way around, life's too short, have an affair. To have their basic membership really gets you nothing. but you do have to then go, it's bronze, gold, silver, it's words like that, they use like that. If you really want to have full interactivity and full access, then you really need to be spending between $40 and $80 a month on those sort of web pages. So yes, it makes a difference.
Right.
Sorry to answer your question in a short way, it does make quite a difference. Your financial commitment reflects your investment and your return. It's a business. It is a business. That's the other thing. It is a significant and growing business.
Yeah.
It's the second largest dating website in the world is an Indonesian website, and it has millions. It's not even worth saying how many millions because it'll change in the time that we've recorded this. There'll be more people on it. It's one of the biggest dating websites in the world. I guess the other thing to bear in mind is the changing community, the growth of mature age dating. So people who are maybe at the end of a 20-year relationship, into their 50s or even older, who are now using online dating to meet. The thought of your nana being hit on by somebody else online is confronting probably for some people, but that is certainly a growth area, and it's different. And if students care to have a look at the web links, there's one up there. There's a whole lot of mature age dating. It's quite a different approach to some of those other dating sites. Theoretically, you should be able to have one site that serves all people, but the market has very cleverly decided that there is a niche for everything, and the ageing community certainly is one of those growth areas. There's an assumption that it'll all be the Facebook generation, people who have, with 500 friends but nobody to go to the movies with, that they'll be 17 or 18, but in actual fact, there's a whole other market as well. Online dating sort of has a cousin as well, in that there's packages that you can load on your phone now, which are all about geography. Things like Blender, Grindr. And what they do is, and not just them, there are packages which you can download to your phone, which are very popular in Japan, that allow you to specify what you're interested in, what you're looking for, and then it looks for other devices. Say if you're at a nightclub, it looks around and it tells you that, in actual fact, that person over there shares your interests. They like cats, they like watercolour painting, and will link you together. So that's not new either, it's been a long time. But Blender and Grindr and things like that actually allow you to locate people who have a similar interest to you in particular activities and combine you together. And they're enormously successful, particularly Grindr in the gay community is. It was bigger and bigger and bigger. It's declining a little now, but it's certainly one of the most popular geographic, what we call it, dating. It's a form of dating. It's a meeting widget on your phone. What it is one of many widgets which you can load onto Facebook. Primarily it uses Facebook because that's where most people live their digital lives now. And it allows you to go through all of your friends, every single one of your friends and connections in your wall, and to simply click against their name that you're interested in an encounter. And you can go through everyone, and I mean everyone in your book, and you can just tell them. You can notify them by clicking on the widget that you're interested in a physical encounter. As long as the people that you're interested in have loaded Bang It Up onto their webpage and they've specified that they're interested in an encounter with you, it basically joins you together. So you can go through and mine your Facebook friends, say you've got 400 or 500, which is pretty common, and you can decide who you fancy. And as long as they fancy you, you get a little connection together, and from there you can do with it what you like. Now that's one fairly contemporary version because it uses the existing software and it uses the most popular form of social software. So you don't have to go off to a third-party dating site. You don't have to put in your PIN number, your fake Gmail account you've set up especially for dating, and you don't have to put in your credit card. It just uses an existing system. So it's intriguing. It doesn't pretend to be a dating site. There are some deep and dark places, of course, in online dating, when there are, in actual fact, websites. And anybody who's been watching the television lately will see that there's an advert which comes on during prime time for cougars, which of course is a derogatory term for older women, mainly older women who are interested in younger men. There's actually a Meet a Cougar dating website advertised on Channel 9, I think, that could be wrong. Students will know, they will see the advert because it always makes me wonder if it's a joke, but it's obviously it's big enough to spend $10,000 to $20,000 on prime time advertising. So we're talking big business. I suppose it makes sense that whenever there's a boom in one part of the industry, there'll be a boom in the other part of the industry. You know, that there are swings and roundabouts. I haven't looked, except sort of in passing interest in those, because there's a moral dilemma around them, around the whole idea of trust. If you feel that you need to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend logger, then fundamentally there's something wrong with your relationship. The same thing can be said for the fact that you have an Ashley Madison account, that there's something wrong with the relationship as well. It hints at a deeper problem. But they're also big business. So they're not just for boyfriends and girlfriends. I mean, they have a history in things like tracking their children. Because if you think of the main justification adults use for giving their children a mobile phone is for safety and surveillance. So it's an extension of that. Whether I think they're a good or bad idea, they're interesting. It's an interesting concept that you would need to log your boyfriend or girlfriend to keep an eye on them. I'll leave that to students to decide. I think that's good or bad.
I was reading an article on boyfriend log and it had the designer saying we went a bit too far with that. We're a small company and we were hoping to make a bigger name for ourselves, so we invented boyfriend log. And then they had to sort of say, no, we should have done that. So I think it's off the cards now, but it's just for money. Just for reputation and branding. And it was one of those build it and they will come. Yeah. They didn't know there was a need for it until they designed it. Yeah. The porn industry are the innovators. They are the ones that compress files. They can send more for less. Their production values are often high and their costs are very low. In terms of distribution, they've got some of the best free and paid networks there are. So it's difficult if you put aside the content and about the collection of butterflies, you would have them as award winners. They are really the pin-ups of the digital world. The difficulty is, of course, is that they're not distributing information about butterfly collecting. It is somewhat different. The link between the two, and that's there's a study which has been done in the US which suggests that some websites, such as Flirt, Have a Fling, Ashley Madison, are increasingly being populated by working men and women. So people from the sex industry have realised that this is a marketplace to go to. That if you've got the intention of having an affair and you've come to one of these websites, the chances are you might also be willing to pay for that. So that inevitable. And those people who are working in these websites are eventually banned and kicked out and stuff. People complain, but for every person that is acted on, I guess there's probably 5 or 6 people that go, well, this is a good place to go to recruit, to work. I guess it makes sense, because if almost every other industry is multi-platforming and has to get on all these different devices, you would say that it's sort of it's a commercially savvy move.
It's just a little bit of convergence, it's bringing all the worlds in together. Realise that there's a market out there that's looking for this. I've got a product which is relatively similar, I'll sell it to them. So it's the big challenge with the porn industry is if you can put aside the nature of the content, it's actually quite intriguing to. They have led things like YouTube and digital file sharing. Really, they've innovated way above and beyond anyone else. But it's quite difficult because there's a whole range of moral issues with it as well. Difficult. Online dating and porn are separate things. That's bear in mind that there might be crossovers in between, but fundamentally, online dating has become respectable. It's now increasingly acceptable, respectable. It's a form of community that has some validity, and I think if students were honest with themselves, they probably would consider it. And one of the things that's worth doing is to go off to, I just pick one, Oasis, it's a fairly general one, and to sign up, to look at what it is, because what it is full of people like themselves. It's the moral dilemma and panic about online dating, I think, is declining, and the acceptability is going up. Some of the elements worth thinking about with online dating are community, changing community expectations and the opportunities to meet. Things like the decline of church youth groups, for example, mean that opportunities for people to meet in an analogue way have declined, so kind of thing. Stuff like risk, identity, representation. It's always worth, for a bit of fun, sitting down at the kitchen table with a pen and a piece of paper and writing down how you would represent yourself online if you had to. What would you say about yourself? And then compare it to what you know to be real, and then you learn a little bit about that as well. And also about the fact that no matter how hard we work to anticipate what these mean, there's always something that we think would happen as a result of these new initiatives. Always something comes out of it that is completely unexpected. And one of those is opportunities for people to be harmed through them as well. That's all.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching, and have a good week.